Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Post Military Playbook. In this episode, Luke and I discuss his time in the military, his transition from data science in the Air Force to data science in the civilian world. He talks about leaving his first civilian job. And finally, Luke gives advice to servicemen and women on how to prepare for their transition. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Post Military Podcast. I'm your host, Billy, and today I am on with one of my friends and freshman buddies, Luke Brantley. Luke, thanks for coming on.
Hey there. It's great to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a minute. Yeah, just that everybody knows. Luke and I, we joined the Air Force Academy together. We went through freshman year together. It was rough and certainly harder than it is now, as the old graduates say. And yeah, then we went to different squadrons sophomore year, and and was it been like 8 years since since like we've really
Right around
connected.
there.
So it's
Yeah.
crazy. But Luke was gracious enough to come on today to share his insights and thoughts for everybody. So Luke, just to get us kind of started, tell all the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you did in the military.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited about what you're doing here. So I'll go kind of chronologically. So, yep. Graduated from the Air Force Academy, and the Air Force decided to let me do some more schooling. So, got my master's in operations research, kind of went with my job as operations research analyst. Um, so I forget what I think it's a 15 alpha now. They changed it at some point. But did that. That was a good time over at Affit in Dayton. Kind of control your own schedule and kind of free form, which was unlike anything else. But from there, transition over to Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, working for Air Mobility Command. Um, the operation research, just they're usually at command, so just supporting whatever kind of projects the staff has that are data related. So got to do a bunch of stuff that I found fun. Working on things from personnel to maintenance and all sorts of things. So I like the fact that I can kind of mix up the topics of what I'm working on. Got to do one uh, South Carolina stand deployment before I left, working for the uh, um, the
Weird
AOC.
accent. Oh, you were at
Yep,
the
for
AOC.
for
Okay.
AFCENT. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
What years were you there?
let's see. That was 2020 to 2021.
Dang, we missed
So
we missed each other by like a year.
yeah,
I did the Shaw stand deployment as well. I was literally leaving tech school, and my unit hit me up and was like, "Hey, you're deploying to Shaw Air Force Base." And I was like, "Where in Afghanistan is Shaw Air Force Base?" And I looked it up, and I was like, "South Carolina isn't in the Middle East." And
yeah,
that was like, it was really funny talking to all the people downrange who were like actually deployed. I was like, "Yeah, it's rough out here."
yeah. My
Sumter's
apartment has
gross.
a swimming pool, and feel bad, but also it
Air
was a
Force
weird
life.
time for sure.
I
Yeah.
believe it. So
But
what'd you do after your time in South Carolina?
I actually I'm trying to remember exact timing, but somewhere I think maybe during that that assignment, it was when I made my official I'm leaving Air Force decision. And so during that time, I was doing a lot of prep. Started doing a lot of prep of what am I going to do afterwards. Started looking at skill bridge stuff, just doing all the prep. And so when I got back, I had like a couple months before I started skill bridge. And then yeah, so it was kind of a lame duck session there, and started working for a mental health startup, um, for my skill bridge. I got in before companies had to be registered with the Department of Labor, so I kind of created my own skill bridge. So feel lucky that I was able to get that before the rules were changed. Did that for a year, and then now working for a hospital system in North Carolina where I live now, doing data science work still.
Very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
just for everyone out there, you're gonna hear you'll hear a lot of our guests talking about how got these really sick skill bridge programs. One thing to key in that definitely just brought up was uh, you can't just go to any company now. There's a list. People have to apply for them. Back in the day, it's pretty sweet. You could just sell yourself as a labor to someone, and then you can just kind of make it work. So, not how it works anymore, unfortunately. But there's a very pretty exhaustive list of what's out. But sweet. So Luke, what? So you said you kind of like knew you were going to transition. So um, what was like your reasoning for deciding to make that transition in the first place?
Yeah, there are kind of several things at play. Um, I would say like personal and career is kind of how I break out the two buckets. So personal, just kind of um, you know, had had my mini deployment, and didn't love being away from my wife for 6 months, and knew that we wanted to start a family soonish, and so um, didn't really want that to be my lifestyle going forward. So that was kind of the personal side of things, and also just kind of wanting to pick a place and kind of set roots. Um, but then on the career side, you know, I hate to rag on the Air Force too much. They gave me so much, and so I'm very thankful for that. But at the same time, I mean, just being a gigantic organization, I felt that technologically I was starting to cap out already, and that the longer I stayed, the farther I was going to be behind everyone outside the Air Force.
Yeah, and
And yeah,
I mean, I think, sorry to cut you off, but I think that's a very fair statement. I mean, we both work in tech, and especially in data science, like there is wild stuff going on, and most of it isn't, at least in the public facing side of the government. So, so I don't think that
yeah,
that's necessarily a bad thing to understand that. While like
yeah,
Google's out here like putting out Bard, and Bing is now apparently an AI that hit on you. So like
yeah.
there's like some
It's
pretty
the
crazy
dream.
stuff. So I definitely get that. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
So
I mean, it's kind of those
oh
combinations, just kind of
yeah.
wanted to change the direction, like, of how I saw, my working life, and then also just, yeah, felt like I needed a bigger challenge.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that it's really good that you understood kind of why you wanted to make that change. I think that a lot of people, um, they either get capped out of the military, like, oh, I hit 20 or 30 years and now I have to leave, and I don't really have any defining like principles post exit, or I hate the Air Force or whatever branch of service I'm in, and I just leave based off of anger, and that's not a really good reason to leave either. So I think that the fact that you have pretty well defined goals is really good, and I'm sure that that's helped you post transition as well, kind of figure out who you are. Um, when you so once you were like, okay, I want to get into a more high speed data space and for my job, and my wife and I were ready to put down roots. Once you made that decision, what did you start doing to prepare for your transition?
Yeah, yeah. I'll also add to the last question just because I think it'll come up as we talk still, that, one other reason was I knew that I had kind of like a new mission that I wanted to go after, and that's improving healthcare both from, like, eh, m making, life better for healthcare providers and being able to, make it easier to get healthcare for patients out there. So, like, I think also having what, like you said, just kind of a reason, a new motivation is important, or is helpful at least in making the transition, easier because it's always good to have like a driving factor there.
Yeah,
Um,
I would say it's almost essential. So, but
yeah, yeah,
so we'll go back to that because I do kind of want to dive into that a little bit. But so when you knew you were going to transition, what did you start doing to prep yourself?
yeah, yeah. Um, I This is one place that I did decent at. Would have liked to have started even sooner. I would say probably at the 8 month mark is when I started kind of um, looking at one what jobs are out there that I would be interested in. That was kind of my leading thing. Just seeing what's out there. What do I think I match with? What for where you can see salaries and stuff like that. What do I feel like I could land? Um, and then from there, you know, I just applied for several just off the bat because I think it's the practice makes perfect thing. Don't expect to get one of the first jobs that you apply for,
Hmm.
plural there, and that you do need to learn what people are looking for because there's basically no interview process in the military. And so that's a big thing to learn, a big skill to gain. So once I learned kind of that there was a need for that, um, I I really like studied one content wise, being a technical guy, like content of you know statistics and like data modeling and like these actual school type things, but then also, looking out examples for how to improve my resume. What are the different types of interview questions I need to be prepared to ask? Like literally writing out responses and figuring out how to say them as if I hadn't written them down. All those types of things. So yeah, so just just trying out what I eventually wanted to be successful.
Did you so when you're coming up with these kinds of observations of like, hey, I have to understand what's needed out in the world. I need to make myself desirable essentially. I'm not just going to get put in a bucket arbitrarily like in the military. Um, was this done based off of just observation or like what kind of content were you consuming content? Were you talking to people? Like what were you
Yeah.
doing to kind of get out there to feel out like to come to the conclusions that you eventually did?
Yeah. I think part of it was so yes, talking specifically, I was looked at LinkedIn mostly for the types of jobs that I was looking at. So I'd read through the job descriptions there, look at specific skills that they're calling for, you know, levels of skills that they're calling for. Um, and then also as far as like prep for interviews and resume and stuff like that, a lot of YouTube content there of here's what happens in an interview, here's a recorded interview that we have and what it literally looks like. Um, yeah, those are a few examples.
That's awesome. Did you reach out to other veterans or folks that were that had either previously transitioned or were working at the companies that you were interested in to make that transition, or were you basically just like consuming just like articles, videos, social media posts, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I think that's super important. I think the best way to have a successful transition is to find someone that has recently transitioned, and it's fresh on their mind of all those different tasks you have to do, what what things they had to learn. Um, I think that's where a podcast like this is great because you don't not everyone's going to have that person that they know that just got out and has learned all these lessons or remembers them. But yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of it is just either looking into having a good network or growing your own and just kind of seeking out people. I found that people were really receptive to the message of, "Hey, I'm a veteran that's trying to get into tech. Um, I have some general question of like what is it like, different things like that. And I would just cold message people on LinkedIn, and I actually got responses and had a few phone calls like that, which is not me. It was like a little bit cringy, but I went for it and I found it useful. And I got um like uh referrals out of that too. So I got interviews because of those conversations.
It's it's definitely I think it's like one of the greatest I don't even want to call it a habit because it's like it's just like it's just a really
Talking to
good just
people.
yeah, course of action. Mm, Like especially in the military, you have such an ingrained familiarity with other people in the military. And as veterans, we all have had to do the transition and find our first job. And so we all understand that it sucks. Um, so don't be for everyone out there, like just like Luke said, like even if talking to people isn't your jam, mm, it's such a great tool. I I am way worse at going out and reading articles and, like, looking at, like, I I think it's so cool that you went out and looked at, like, job descriptions on LinkedIn to digest, like, what skills do I need to learn based off of that. I get in trouble in my current job because Amazon has such a good, like, wiki culture, and people are like, "Just go look it up on the wiki," and I was like, "Yeah, but or I could ask you." Like
I
you're
know.
right here. So
I think that's a military thing, like, "Let's just talk," and everyone else
yeah.
is just like, "No, go read it."
Yeah, exactly, and, that's probably been the hardest part of my transition is I'm like, "Let me just tell me," and they're like, "Or you could look it
Yeah,
up." I'm like, "Or, but because we're on this call, you could just tell me." Like, that's
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what it is, but,
I agree.
it's, that's awesome, though. Definitely 2 really good ways to go about it. I definitely wanna understate, though, for real, like, going through and understanding what's in those job recs, to understand from a technical perspective, um, just from a skills perspective, you so that you can market yourself as someone who has those things, because a lot of companies do resume searches based off those keywords anyway, and so
Yep.
it's something really good to go out and consume and something that I probably should have done more, in my transition. And kind of transitioning to that for you, um, do you looking back on your transition, were there things that you wish you would have done differently that could have helped you, like made things less stressful? Obviously, you seem very happy with where you're at, but were there things that you could have done better during your transition?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just start earlier, like, start planning earlier. Um, like I said before, um, because there was a technical gap from where things were at in the Air Force to where a lot of the tech companies are, like, I just wasn't getting the exposure to certain things that people thought were prerequisites, and so, even though I knew, like, general concepts of what I would need to do, there were gonna be people who would outperform me in an interview or on their resume or something like that. And so I actually lucked out having one interview. The interviewer, the job manager, he actually was like, "Here's a rubric of things that I would expect you to know," and like that was super helpful. And I think that's a good lesson that people people are going to be rooting for you to do well. Because people do, even if you hear differently in the news, like people are appreciative of people's military service, and know that um, former military people as employees are really good workers, and so that's super helpful. But yeah, start early. Network, I could have networked more, take advantage of, um, the the different programs that are out there that are unusual and weird, and you may not know that much about, but once you hear something about, whether it's a skill bridge thing or if it's some other sort of internship or, you know, depending on what you're interested in, there are several programs out there now that, like, look into it some more, because depending on the types of jobs you're going after, like, um, some of these things are really reputable and can really propel you.
For sure. What, just if you had to kind of throw out a number, like say someone says, I want to transition, I don't know when I should start looking. Do you have a number that you would throw out? Like I would start preparing next time.
Yeah, I would say 12 months, a full year beforehand, because the first 2 or 3 months are gonna be the least productive, where you're just finding your path of what it is you need to be doing.
Definitely. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's talking about like and we'll talk about this a little bit more here soon, but you had a very clear set of goals that you wanted to accomplish for getting out. And for some people, that's just not the case. Um, and my recommendation for people is like, if you have a very clear set of goals, like Luke, which if you do, that's a blessing. If you don't, you should start much earlier because you're really just going to want to network and talk to as many people as possible to figure out what do I even want to, because you don't have to do a one-to-one shift. Like you don't have to be a cyber warfare officer like me, who then works as a cybersecurity consultant at Amazon, or a ops research officer who now does science for like a civilian company like Luke. If that's what you like, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily have to be your jam. And if you start early enough, you can really explore a lot of possibilities, which we're uncomfortable with in the military, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. But you should at least allow yourself the time to explore and do yourself that kind of justice. Um, when you were talking about interviews a little, did you find it, or just when you were talking to people, or even now, do you find it difficult to translate your military experience or your skills into things that are understood by the civilian world?
Yeah, I'll say in general, I feel super blessed that I had the Air Force prepared me so well to transition. Like, my job literally does a lot of different things in the civilian world, so I know a lot of people don't have that, and so, yeah, I agree, like, finding what you wanna do, very, very important kind of to figure out. I kinda blank on what you just asked.
Oh, when you were interviewing, when you were interviewing or talking to people, networking, or even now, did you have any difficulties? Like, obviously, you're a database and data science person, so probably not, because I had a lot of the same when I was getting out. Mm, did you have any trouble translating your military, like, jargon, speak, or
Right,
experience into a form that was understood by people who've never even heard of the military?
right, right, yeah. Um to some extent, I definitely had to be very mindful of it. It's a topic that I saw once I started following a lot of
Mhm.
people on, like, LinkedIn and stuff
Yeah.
about, um, transitioning veterans and stuff like that, is that people saying I have a hard time communicating what it was I did. There's so much lingo, there's so much stuff that, you know, talking about
Yeah.
bombs and airplane, like,
No
almost
one
no one
knows.
talks about that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and also conveying what's important. That was a hard thing because so many companies follow the same sort of like metrics and things that they care about, which I didn't
Mhm.
know anything about.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that was I think less so explaining what it was that I did that was important, but more
Mhm.
so understanding what they held as important. And then also kind of tying the link of like,
Yeah.
well, I didn't really think about it, but this thing I did over here was kind of similar to the thing that they care about.
How did you what did you do to kind of cross the gap, I guess, is, for
Yeah,
lack of a better term?
yeah. I, to me, so the way that I learned throughout this whole process was just interviewing, failing, and continuing. And so it was that process of uh, just kind of learning what worked, what got better feedback on, um, and yeah, just doing more research on the companies you're interested in, checking out their website, checking out blogs about them, you know, see what's the hot topics and understanding what's important to them and just kind of getting creative with how you can connect to that.
That makes sense. What so once you made kind of switching gears, once you've made the transition, I guess what was the most difficult aspect of making that transition for you? Like, not necessarily what part of the process did you struggle with,
Yeah.
um, which I mean, I guess if there were things that other things were there before we move on, I guess, were there any other parts of the process that you struggled with that you
Yeah.
want to like bring to light for people before we kind of talk about post transition?
Yeah. I'll say just procedurally, the actual out processing stuff on the Air Force side, um, I I felt that there were several times where things were not stated very clearly. I was also going through it during 2020, and so like the normal meetings weren't happening and stuff, and no one really knew who to talk to, and so but I've talked to friends since then that are going through transition process. There's still I feel that the transition support personnel at local bases, one is very different from base to base, and the advice they give is very different from base to base, and that you know you have you like you have to be more concerned about your transition than and not rely on them because they have 100 people that they're looking at, and also I do feel there is a bit of a tinge against people that are separating early and not retiring.
Yeah, no, I would agree. The biggest piece that I'll tack on to what you just said is like you really need to put in a lot to get the most out of your transition because um it, I don't know if it's designed the way that it is because they're more worried about intaking than outtaking people. I don't even know if outtaking is a word, but it works. They But the hardest part is we in the military, we're so used to being passive on, like, a macro scale. Like, it's just kinda like, I'll take what's given to me, and I'll probably complain about it, but, I mean, like, I'll deal. And out processing the military is really the first time that, like, you're only gonna do it once, and you really have to take a lot of initiative, and by the time you get
Yeah.
there, so many people are like, I'm done, and I don't wanna put more into the military, and then they end up dropping the ball on, like, the one thing that will affect the rest of their life. So if you're in that place where you're just like, "I cannot wait to get out of the military, and, like, I wanna push my date of separation up, like, I'm taking terminal now, like, I'll worry about VA later, I'll worry about position later," like, whatever it is, that's a very, very bad way to look at it. So, you know, it's, completely agree with what you're saying, and, yeah, I can't imagine, like I was down in Mississippi, so we cared about COVID a little bit less, and, so I it was nice from that regard, but I also started really early and asked a lot of questions, so I was pretty prepared, but that was really the only reason why, so I definitely agree with you. So when you were once you, like, hit that separation button, um, what do you think was, like, the hardest part about your transition? Like, someone handed you your DD-214, they were like, "Thanks for your service, uh, don't come back." Like, what post receiving that paperwork on your last day, like, what do you think was the hardest part of that, like, very like, that, like, flashpoint of, like, Luke, the like, Captain Brantley, and, then, like, Luke Brantley, just the guy?
Yeah, yeah. So, uh, because I got to do my skill bridge with a company that they they hired me, but just as an intern during my skill bridge, and so it was a foregone conclusion I was going to be hired afterwards. So I basically was done about 4 months before my data separation, um, and didn't even have to go back to the base to finish things off. So I was really done with it. But there was that break basically when I started there. And to me, it was it was a culture difference, and that it is real. I feel like you hear a lot of people saying similar things that just don't seem realistic or maybe inflated before you go through this process. Um, and like the one, it's a lot of work. I was like, I'm pretty smart. I can do this. It's a lot of work. Two, it's a culture change. Yes, it's a culture change. And like, what does that mean? That's something that I I've dug into with myself some. I don't know have it fully figured out yet. But one, depending on where you go, uh, one of the biggest things is just like the motivations of the people you're working with have completely changed. Like, you're really, I mean, you're told what your motivation is going to be. I mean, you're literally brought up in the organization to think a certain way, quite literally. And that, when you go somewhere else, you have um, a lot of different things that are motivating people and a lot of really motivated people, which is really cool. And it's just understanding. The big thing to me is like, um, same thing with the interviews of meeting with a new business is what do they care about, and like you have to align interests basically is what I'm saying. And that you can't take for granted that there is some common interest that you can point to that is going to be that common thing. And so yeah, that was one big shock to me. Um, but it's pretty subtle and it's a little bit hard to point out, but it was just like, and I think there's just more ambiguity because of that. Like there's more stepping on eggshells and things like that, and you have to kind of. I was always like, I want feedback, just like how are we doing? Like, let's just do things and say it, and there's I think a lot more tact and trying to protect people's feelings and stuff.
Yeah, I definitely I definitely agree. I really like what you said about the like it's subtle. Like the loss is subtle. The shift is subtle. And I think like the word that I like to use to describe it sometimes is kind of insidious, which if you don't know what that means, um, I don't actually know what the definition is off the top of my head. So but it's like this like creeping um like, it's, like, in the back of your head. You're like, "I should be happy, like, I hit this milestone, I'm out of the military," like, if you're a person who was lucky enough to crush their transition, like, your VA stuff went off without a hitch, you hit all your milestones, you got a 6-skill bridge, you have a job before your terminal or whatever it is, like, there's a lot of objective reasons why you should feel super stoked about where you're at in life, and then, like, just in the back of your head, you're just like, "Oh, like, what is this in my heart that I'm feeling?" And I think for a lot of people, like, it's really hard to define, like, which is just like you had this massive shift change of perspective, and so much of your life is different now. Like, you're not the military is so all-consuming in nature that, like, you, um, like, it's like you're gonna feel lost because you're just not it's just like this commonality between so many aspects of your life is gone. Um, what did you like, I really like what you said, like, um, if someone would've told me back then what I'm saying right now, I wouldn't have, like, believed him. What do you think you could like, if Luke Brantley now was talking to you a year before you transitioned, what do you think you could have said that you would have believed?
Um, hmm. Yeah, I what said I would have believed is that I'm gonna enjoy the thing that I care about, that I'm passionate about, that fits my motivation. And there are a lot of things that pull try to pull away from that. There's the money aspect, there's the, like, prestige aspect, there's that sounds fun, but does it really match the thing that motivates me? Um, and I I think another part of, uh, the shift is that sometimes the first place we pick out of, the military isn't going to be the best fit for what we care about, what our motivations are. Um, but something I like is that you can switch, and you can learn and you can see, well, these were the things that didn't really match up with what I thought it was going to be like, what that job was going to be like, what the people are going to be like, what the goal of the company was going to be like, and then you can move on and ask questions in your next interview that get more information.
Yeah. Um, I wanna get back to the passions, but I guess a question that I'm honestly really curious about because I have yet to leave the first job that I've had, out of the military. Like, I would have leaving the military's hard. We're creatures that are developed to be content with where we're planted, like grow where you're planted. Which is a horrible phrase, that everyone in the military's heard once. At least. Did you have any issues like I'm leaving my first like what was that like for you when you decided like this isn't for me and
Yep.
now I'm going somewhere else? Like how did you
Yeah.
did you have any like issues with that or what was that like?
Yeah, it was very difficult too. Um, it grew the Another thing is you don't really know how to handle yourself. At the beginning of this process to begin with, as like I when I started applying for jobs or interviewing, like felt like I was cheating, like um, I'm spending this time not on Air Force stuff. Oh, that's bad. Or like, I'm looking at jobs while I'm in a job. Ooh, that's bad. But I mean, you gotta your career is a very personal thing, which is weird when it's like a village thing in the military. Um, yeah, and so the reason why I started looking was one, I did not have great work life balance. I was starting to get a little burnt out, um, and you know, just realized that a lot of people, the military life as your career takes over your life. A lot of people also let non-military jobs take over their entire life, and I was like, well, that's one reason why I changed things up. So, um, it wasn't matching for me in that way. And then I also realized, it was a thing of I I thought that this company was doing things in this way, um, but it was doing things in a different way. And so I wanted to find like all companies are there to make money, but how they go about doing that, that kind of has a kind of goes along with like what are your motivations or like if you are just like let's make the most money, like there's you don't want, that's a different company than like a nonprofit or something like that. So I mean, you have to tailor that to what you want out of it.
What so when you felt like you were like cheating on the Air Force and maybe with your first job, like how'd you get over that? Like how did you move through those emotions of like guilt because you felt
Yeah,
some loyalty to the force or the role or the company? Like
yeah,
how'd you move through that?
yeah. um I think one, having someone to help push you, having my wife like be like, yep, like that's just what you got to do. um that was a huge help. But also I think, yeah, it's just like I am scared, but I'm gonna click submit on send my application of like let's just see what happens. So I think just like getting yourself over the hill just a little like, "Oh, let's try it out." Be a little reckless. Um, and yeah, I guess, like, not having too high expectations or, like, putting too much pressure on it.
That's good. No, I like that. Yeah, it's definitely a weird feeling. And honestly, it's cool that you brought that up because it's something I personally didn't have to deal with in my transition just because of like the medical circumstances of what happened to me. So it's just kind of like, oh, the Air
Yeah.
Force is breaking up with me. Like I'm not even choosing to leave. Like they're leaving me. And so it was just it's cool. It's a cool and something that I personally haven't thought of. So thank you for bringing that up. So going back to that like weird like creeping sense of like things are different. Um, do you feel like the motivations that you previously brought up, like I want to create, I want to build a family, I don't want to be gone. I want to I want to work with high, like bleeding edge tech, and I want to work in healthcare. Um, do you feel like though having those kind of like guiding lights helped you move past like those feelings of loss from leaving the Air Force?
I definitely just had a new set of motivations, and that, like, that was what was most important to me. And there would be times where it's, like, a specific moment and you're, like, either about, certain people or, like, an opportunity for money or things like that, that would kind of, like, be like, "Well, what if I did this? What if I did this?" Um, and then I was like, "No, like, I wrote this down. I know that these are the things that are most important to me whenever I have a time to reflect. Like, I have to trust myself. I mean, as long as that's still what I'm feeling, that like I think that yeah, that's what's gonna give me the sustained happiness.
That's
Um,
good.
yeah,
Do you so going to like I think that a lot of people can resonate with wanting to work like they hate government computers. So like I don't think that that's a thing that anyone in the military does not feel. And like I want to be with my family more or I want to set down roots. I think that those are two very common sentiments that if you ask someone why they left the force, they would tell you like these are probably well, not that I hate government computers, but like the family one for sure. But I know plenty of people who are like, yeah, any computer that runs on NipperNet sucks. The other one's more really interesting to me, which is that healthcare, like that's a very clearly defined mission statement of like I want to work in healthcare to do this thing. Like when did you come up with that and how did you get to that point where you knew like not only what I want to do in healthcare, like not only what I want to do, but I know what market vertical I want to do it for. Like how did you get to that?
yeah, yeah. So it's a pretty simple answer. It's my wife. She's a physician assistant, so like it was. I mean, her first job was working in the emergency room during COVID, and just in St. Louis, and it was just craziness. I'm like, there has to be better ways of like doing this. And so, yeah, I got to see a very tangible thing of here's something that still like to me has a noble mission of helping people help people. And yeah, it's also kind of near and dear to my heart. So another one that may not be generalizable very well, but explains how I got to mine.
No, I think that I think that that's a really cool I don't know if anything about a transition process is really generalizable. I think
Yeah.
it's all kind of like it's very personal. And you can get a close approximation by listening to a lot of people's stories, but at the end of the day, like I think what you're saying and what I would completely agree with is like your real success in this transition process really revolves around whether you can figure out what your passion or mission is, and that's going to be different for everybody. And
Yeah.
so yeah, but no, I think that that's
And
really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, and I'll harp back that even if you can't figure it out, be willing to try something out and then be willing to pivot if that's not it.
Yeah.
And that's a beauty that I have found of having the flexibility.
Yeah.
So
It's
don't freak out if you can't find it yet.
yeah, for sure. And I think for me, like I'm currently going through that. Like my job is cool, but it's not like I don't like wake up every morning like on fire to like talk about cloud security, but like it's a good job and I'm happy for
Yeah.
it, but I'm still certainly moving through that like discovery process myself. So it's really cool to hear folks like you who have like really nailed down like what that might look like, which is awesome.
Yeah.
What I guess when you're did you feel like you have any difficulties kind of separating yourself from your military self? Because like um you can talk about your experience, but like no one really knows much about the military outside of the military unless they were in the military, and you sound kind of weird if you talk about it all the time. And like I'll share like my stories. Like people like I felt like I was kind of a big shot because I went to a military school because everyone knows about it in like the organization that feeds into. Then you go outside of it and people are like, "What's that?" I was like, "Man, that's crazy." But did you feel like you had any issues kind of I don't wanna say moving on. That sounds like because it sounds bad because it sounds like you shouldn't be proud of like having your identity, your service, like it all matters, but it also can hold you back as you have to move on in your life. So did you have any issues with that? And, yeah, we'll start with there.
Yeah. I don't think I had issues, and I also don't think I purposefully shed anything. I think I held on to that identity, but with the knowledge that no one else gets it. That like, you know, I I maintain the like, you know, I don't know. I feel like you still get to be a representative of what service members are like, even when you're a veteran. Which I really kind of don't like calling myself that because like 5 years, whatever. But um, either way, like I think that's a cool thing that you can still own. That you can still say, you know, I'm still a representation of like of that organization that I respect, those people that I love, that type of thing. And that's kind of a good way of like, yeah, no one's gonna understand you, and you're gonna have to like take twice as long to explain things of what you did before. Um, but I think just in like how you hold yourself and the products that you put out there, like it's fun to get to be a representative of that still.
I completely agree with that, and, that's good. I think that everyone kind of tackles that, like, "Who am I post-military?" Differently, and, grounding themselves in those, like, purposes that we've already talked about, I think is really important, and it sounds like you've done a really good job of doing that. What do you think that you've, like, tried to pursue purpose? I mean, outside of your family, obviously, do you think that you've tried to pursue purpose, um, outside of what you're doing for work? Or do you think that you've primarily found kind of your post-military purpose, um, outside like, in what you're doing, if that makes
Yeah,
sense, for your
yeah. No,
job?
I think it's something I've kind of gone all sorts of directions on. I think the the way that I spend my time and kind of prioritize it, that like I I do flex when I'm feeling like I extra motivated and feeling like there's a near goal to reach. I do flex and spend more of that priority in my job, and that I kind of just leave everything else of to my personal life. I have considered like external things, whether it's you know, do I want to start something on my own on the side? Do I want to be doing little side data projects for people? Um, and and I I I think that's something that I should I should be more open to, and people should be more open to um, trying new things or just extra things because you know I am a bit conservative in my decision making. So I don't want to overextend myself. I've gotten close to that, and so like I for the most part I just kind of keep it between those two lines. But I think yeah, I think it's people should definitely try pushing the boundaries some.
Yeah, but also, like, it kind of is like what do you view as, like, hobbies? Like like you telling me, like, maybe I should start some data projects for other people kind of keys me in onto the fact that, like, for you, data science is would you consider data science, like, you're so interested in it, you would consider it a hobby, but also, like, it just happens to be the thing that you do for work?
I'm like right on the line there.
Okay.
Like if it was, then I would be doing side projects.
Yeah.
It's like I'll start one, it'll get tough, and I'm be like, I have to do this in work, so
So I'm not
I'll
gonna
just skip
yeah,
this. Yeah.
yeah. Do you, so I guess a question that I would ask you, is I've kind of come to this, like, thesis statement that the military the reason why we feel this, like, sense of loss in the military is because it's, like, all-consuming. It's like it's your job, it tells you where you live, all of your friends are probably in it, you shop at the place that it provides food at, you work out at the gyms that are owned by um, like, so many pieces of your life are kind of tied back to it. Um, and I think that that's, like, why we feel lost. Like, even if you hate the military, you're still gonna feel the loss just because so much of what you did revolved around this thing that's now gone. Um, do you think that that's true? Or do you think that that's do you think that there's a better way to define it? Or, how would you kind of
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely connect with that. Like I think the biggest thing is the people, the friends. And as someone who's moved to a new place where he didn't have any friends, like um, you know, it's tough to do, especially when it was like you were forced to have friends with the people you work with. Um, and so yeah, I would say that that's definitely a tough thing. I think uh one addition I would have is just uh people do find a lot of meaning in the mission here, and there are a lot of places that don't have that figured out. Um, and even if it's not the one you connect with the most, like it is noble and it is like yeah, I think that that's one other piece.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like you might hate it, but at least it's for national defense. Like
It
even
makes sense
yeah,
why things are yeah.
yeah, you're like, huh, this really is not tight, but like at least it's maybe contributing to the defense of the nation. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
like
that's the whole
maybe,
thing of like
yeah,
where down the line is
uh,
this making a difference?
yeah,
But
but like then once you leave the military and you're doing like something, you're like, what am I even doing like right now? Like why?
yeah, yeah.
What's this thing? Do you think that do you think that it's ever possible to build up an approximation of, like, that holistic thing that the military was, um, once you're out?
Uh
Actually, do you think you can or should you?
yeah. Um I think it would be difficult because of it's physical. It's the things and the people around you. It's it would have to be like being very involved in your community, which like that's something I want to do, and that's one reason why I wanted to like stay put in one place. And so instead of it being a community spread across hundreds of bases, it's community in one place. Um, and I guess it's like it's more disparate. You have to go to a bunch of different uh, spots to fill all these things that the military did to different levels, but touched on all of them.
That makes sense. Um, if someone was like, if someone said like, Luke, I'm trying to build this version, like this like civilian-y version of like my life in the military. Um, do you think that that's like a healthy way to approach like separation, or do you think that um, do you think that it's like just fundamentally different, and we just kind of all have to come to that?
Yeah, I don't think there's really anything like it, and just the main thing for me is just the community perspective, um, being forced together as a community. You just don't. It brings out certain dynamics that you're just not going to get anywhere else, um, for good and for bad.
That makes sense. Um, so when you if like someone's came up to you and said, "I'm getting out of the military um, soon," what advice might you give that person to not how would they get out? You kind of touched on that already, but like from an emotional perspective, what would you tell somebody they should do um, in order to like start like preparing for
Yeah,
that like all everything that's kind of about to hit them?
yeah. The two things which is kind of a common theme for me is just do some self reflection, figure out your whys, um, and then also get ready to do some new uncomfortable things.
Yeah. Yeah. The what would you have any recommendation like if you're like find your why? Do you have any recommendations for how they could do that?
Talking to people, um, come up with ideas of like this thing sounds interesting, or like I think I care about this. Like find someone and reach out and just be like, hey, tell me about what your day to day life is like. Tell me about like what are the who are the people that are thinking big thoughts in this direction, or you know uh i I leaned on LinkedIn probably too much during my transition time. Since then I've definitely taken a little bit step back, but I mean there's a lot of you know nothing out there, but there's also a lot of people that are putting out ideas that you probably haven't heard of, especially if it's in a new direction. So that's a good kind of central source, but and you just talk to people. Like there there a lot of places say just say you're a student and you can ask any business any question, or it's for a project. The same thing. I feel like I'm trying to transition from the military. I'm trying to understand things. People are very receptive. Um, just talk to people.
One thing that you touched on that I think is that I think is really important is the idea of like finding friends are hard post military. Um, how would you recommend to someone that they should try and find community once they leave? Because I think for a lot of people, like you find yourself on this island the second you get out, and that's it. Like it's a wrap.
Yeah.
So what are do you have any advice that you would like to people who they might not be moving home to be near family. They're just they're just kind of going for it. Like what might you say they should
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully, we've actually made some ground on that, so,
good.
I do have things to say.
That's awesome.
I
It'd be super awkward if you were
for
like,
me,
I don't have any friends.
still working on
It's
it. I
just
mean,
me. Yeah.
I am still working on it, but,
We all are.
uh, no, I for me, sports is a great kind of connector there, and so, we've gotten involved at like our local YMCA and like gotten on a volleyball league. I think joining community leagues is a great place, and a lot of times you can just team up with random people and
See what
boom,
happens.
there you go.
Do you
I
play
think
beach volleyball or do you play like court volleyball?
court volleyball.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
but
just for everyone listening, or watching because we're sitting down, Luke, you're 6'5", right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you're right there with
Yeah,
me.
so volleyball might not be the greatest thing for everyone else to try, but, I just wanted to let you know, like, that's why Luke loves it, is 'cause you can just dunk on people, so,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but, okay, so community leagues, what else would you recommend?
Yeah. Just if you're in a new spot, that's what I did. We just kind of like found a place we thought we'd like, so we moved there and we don't really know anyone. But following all the local social medias and like seeing what events are going on at restaurants and stuff like that. You know, I I just I it doesn't sound like it with what I've been talking with, but I'm not a big like let's go meet new people, do random things with people I don't know. But like I found just you just gotta do it, and you do it once or twice and like get the awkwardness over with, and it usually nets out positive. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree. If you can find for everyone out there, like, gyms are a really awesome place, like, sports leagues, I think is such a cool recommendation. I, uh I definitely think, like, getting into, like, a veterans group it might be, like, really good for you. For my wife and I, getting back into church has been, like, really, impactful for us, which has been awesome, but, um, definitely for everyone out there, like, do not put yourself on an island. Um, the transition process is hard enough, whether, and you don't have to do it by yourself. So, that's, uh, that's the that's my biggest recommendation, and, yeah. So, Luke, last question for everyone out there. Any more like, saved rounds? Anything else? Any more big pieces of advice you'd pass on to, everyone out there?
Um, yeah, I think a big one that I've kind of hit on already, but I'll say in a different way is just own your journey. If you feel like y- things aren't um working the way you think they should be, if you feel like things aren't on track, if you feel like someone should be giving you assistance, they're not, uh, find out, make it happen, like be proactive. Uh, you're the only one that's looking out for you 100%. Uh, and then yeah, lean on the people that have done it recently. Um, try to find resources. Just it is more work than you think it is. So uh I don't know what it takes to make someone believe it until they start doing it. So I guess just keep saying it.
Hopefully, a podcast that puts out weekly episodes of people saying the exact same thing that you're saying right now.
That might be a good idea.
I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, it's someone should think of that. Luke, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking the time to put your wisdom out there for people to learn from. And for everyone who's listening, you can find Luke Brantley on LinkedIn. He'd be more than happy to answer your questions. So if you're transitioning out, interested in data science, or you just everything that he says resonated with you, hit him up. He'd be more than happy to talk. So thanks everybody for your time. This has been another episode of the Post Military Podcast, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace.